Welcome to the Find Your Leadership Confidence podcast with Vicki Nedling. You are about to discover impactful lessons that help you grow as an individual, grow your confidence, and find the positive and good within you, so you powerfully and authentically become the best version of yourself. Be sure you visit our website at www.findyourleadershipconfidence.com. While you're there, subscribe to us via your favorite network. Now tune in, get ready, and enjoy the journey of emerging as a leader of exception in the 21st century.
Welcome, everyone, to the Find Your Leadership Confidence podcast. I'm your host, Vicki Nedling, coming to you from Roswell, Georgia. The goal of this podcast is to bring topics and guests that will empower you and take you and your business to the next level. Today, I am very excited to have Bethany Corbin as my guest, and let me tell you a bit about Bethany. As a healthcare innovation and Femtech attorney, Bethany Corbin is on a mission to help the thought-leading companies revolutionize the global women's health sector. She is the founder of Feminovation, that's a word, which helps founders, clinicians, politicians, and advocates transform and disrupt standard care delivery for women's health through specially tailored legal and educational programs, thought leadership, and advocacy. Bethany is a recognized leader at the intersection of women's health, law, and technology, and was named a top 200 trailblazing leader in women's health and Femtech by Women of Wearables. Her strategic insights have been featured in top news outlets, including Forbes, Fortune, BBC, NPR, BuzzFeed, The Atlantic, Vice, Cosmopolitan, Teen Vogue, and many more. I thought today we would just talk a little bit about digitizing women's health, legal and ethical considerations in Femtech. Please join me in welcoming Bethany Corbin. Hi, Bethany. Such a very nice background for somebody so young.
Thank you, Vicki. So happy to be on this show and appreciate those kind words.
So we always start with the easy question for you. What is your home? Where do you call home?
Sure. So I am located in Charlotte, North Carolina. It's been home for us since about 2006. But before that, we've lived all across the country, a lot of moving for my dad's job. So finally nice to have a home base.
Well, my niece, who's about your age, actually moved to Charlotte she bought a house about a year ago, I guess. And so I should hook the two of you together so you can hang out, and maybe she's an editor for books.
Oh, that's fantastic. I'd love to meet her.
Yeah,
it's hard to meet people in Charlotte.
Yes, I know, because, when you're in a strange town and everything, and since you've been established a while, you might be great. So not only do we do help in your business, but we help you get your life going there.
I need that.
Awesome. So how do you race to market? How do race to market strategies hurt both consumers and Femtech digital health founders?
Yeah, it's a great question.
And before we do that, can you just define Femtech, please, for the audience, in case they're 65 and older like me and have not heard that a lot?
Sure, it's a relatively new term, so even millennials haven't heard about that. It's actually a term that was coined in 2016. And it came about because of the need to have personalized digital solutions for women's healthcare. So when we talk about Femtech, we're talking about female health technologies, right? So these are things that you've probably heard of, like period tracking apps, ovulation apps. We're starting to see women's health telehealth companies, the Aura Ring. Yes. All of those are solutions that are coming onto the market, wearables, apps, et cetera, to really pioneer the next phase of women's health care. And the reason that we have this industry in the first place, because you're probably thinking, well, you know what, there's no men tech, right? Why is there femtech? The reason for that is the fact that women's health has been historically neglected from modern medicine. We weren't even allowed into clinical trials until 1993. And even then, a lot of the data sets that we have on new drugs and new devices coming onto the market, they don't include sex as a differentiating variable in the research that they're doing. So really, we're trying to build, as part of the femtech industry, the data sets that we need on women's health and bring women's health to the forefront.
Excellent. Thank you for explaining that. So back to our question about the markets, race to market strategies hurting both consumers and femtech legal health founders.
Yeah, so in the industries, regardless of what industry, whether it's digital health broadly or femtech, there's always this mentality amongst entrepreneurs that the goal is to get the product to the market the fastest, not only so you can start to recoup some of the money that you've invested into that product, but also because you don't want somebody else to come on the market and preempt your idea, right? Steal your product or get there first. So there's always a bit of a push, just even from the starts of a company, to get to market fast. We've also started to see pushes for faster market entry from investors, especially in the femtech industry. I was just at a conference a couple of weeks ago, and I've spoke to a lot of investors, and they said, well, you know what, we want products that are going to get to the market faster so that we have a quick return on our investment. We're not as interested in funding the products that might have to go through lengthy FDA approvals or clinical trials, because then it's going to take us a lot longer to get our money back. So with that background, we've seen a lot of femtech companies starting to race to the market. And that can have some serious implications.
Yes.
And it's honestly things that founders and even consumers aren't necessarily thinking about. The first implication that it has is with respect to security. So a lot of the products that we're talking about involve some type of coding or algorithms in them. If coding and algorithms are done quickly and without the necessary oversight, training, and security protocols, what we get is inaccuracies in the code and vulnerabilities. And so there are statistics that show there can be somewhere between 10 to 50 inaccuracies or mistakes per 1,000 lines of code if you're doing it quickly. And just think about how many vulnerabilities that exploits for somebody like a hacker to come into those apps and get your data. The research has shown that that number drastically decreases to somewhere around, 1 to 10 inaccuracies per 1,000 lines of code if we're actually taking the time to make sure that the code is secure. So that's kind of the first thing, right? You're putting your data at risk. The second thing is that we get inaccurate products. And this partly comes down as well to the regulatory environment that we have around femtech and the FDA's approval of medical devices. But a lot of the apps that you see on the market today, right, like your period trackers, your ovulation apps, right, maybe your wellness trackers, they're not necessarily doing anything from a diagnostic perspective, right? They're helping you kind of take control of your health, getting you resources, allowing you to track. And as a result, they typically fall under FDA's enforcement discretion, meaning they're not going to be heavily scrutinized before they get to the market. What that means, though, is that these companies can kind of rush these products to the market, and they can do so using methodologies, medicine, science that hasn't been proven or that has actually been disproven. And there are some very surprising accuracy statistics for femtech that I'll share with you. When we look at the femtech apps that are on the market, there have been studies, especially amongst the period tracking and ovulation apps. One study looked at over 100 of those apps, and it found that none of them could accurately predict ovulation, and that the best accuracy rate was 21%. And these are apps, right, that women are using to predict their fertility and make actual decisions about their bodies. Other studies have found that some of the period tracking apps on the market today are using scientifically disproven methodologies, and disproven, not even recently, but back from like the 1930s. And so they're not at all scientifically validated. There's an organization that has actually looked at hundreds of femtech applications, and they found about 85% of those on the market do not meet their clinical quality thresholds. And this is a result, right, of getting that product to market fast and trying to capitalize on women's healthcare as a monetary return instead of something that could actually be used to revolutionize the way in which we think about women's health.
Wow. As you're talking about that, so as I said, I'm 65. Whenever I decided I wanted to have kids in my late 20s, I didn't want to use drugs or anything. So I did the basal thermometer method,
Yep.
and got really good and had both my babies in May because I didn't want to be in the hot summer.
So smart.
So, it is, you can do that. People and always, oh no, just chance. I was like, no, I knew everything about my body. And so that's why these apps, I think, are really helpful for women if they could get it right. Because when you know your body like that, you know when you're going to get sick, when you're, there's things going on. And so I was
Absolutely.
excited to hear that there were apps that were much easier probably than what I was doing, but sad to hear that there's some that really just don't do it.
Yeah, and some of them use the exact method that you did, but the difference is, right, you were able to do it on your own, and that app is collecting your data, right, and selling your data, and so there's some negative
Oh
consequences
yeah.
that
Yeah.
we don't, that we wouldn't have had if we kept with the manual methods, despite the fact that those apps do make it quite convenient. And the other thing is, it's really hard for consumers to actually even know how to vet these apps, right? There are some good apps on the market that are clinically validated, have medical advisory boards. How do consumers vet those versus the ones that are just racing to market? We don't have any type of standard that would allow consumers to easily check.
So is that something that you offer as one of your services of like, here we have for consumer services, Trust Dale. Do we have a Trust Bethany piece of your website that says, these are ones we vetted and they're okay?
It's a fantastic question. So it doesn't exist yet, but it's actually something that we're working to build as part of Fem Innovation, kind of our phase 2 and phase 3 launch for 24. We're looking not only to build a comprehensive platform for founders and clinicians and investors, but also one for consumers where they could come and have a one-stop shop for all of the credible resources on women's health, right? There's so much misinformation out there. We want to be able to help them push past the misinformation, get information about what their health condition might be, what they're looking for, and see the reputable Femtech products that are available to help them in their conditions.
Excellent.
So it's forthcoming.
That's awesome. So what do women's health founders need to know about that algorithm and Femtech design? Is it something that the technology, as we get to more AI and things, is that going to help improve the results that you get to help, as you said, the more I did it, the better I got at it. Can AI help that current technology be more like my brain?
That is the goal. So I have seen an increasing number of Femtech products actually incorporating AI into their design. The problem is your AI is only going to be as good as the test data that you've trained it on. What we've seen in some past instances is that AI and the algorithms are not being trained on representative data for the entire population that the app is supposed to serve. And because of that, we've seen these algorithms make some inaccurate predictions for certain racial or ethnic minority groups because their data wasn't included in the algorithm's test functions. And so that is something that we're really keeping in mind right now. It's also a concern that I'm starting to have a bit more since the Dobbs decision came out, because it means that women who are in those, maternity deserts, right, or in states that may have more stringent reproductive health laws, that they may be less willing to use Femtech devices. And so, unfortunately, just, the way that it plays out is that oftentimes the states with more restrictive reproductive health laws involve more minorities. And because of that, we're seeing less minority data being inputted into these devices. And that is concerning for me, right? Because then that means that potentially we could have inaccurate prediction.
Right.
The other concern that I have is, somebody can be as diligent as they can, right? Do all of this representative test data, have a good algorithm built. The thing we can't really guard against is consumers inputting inaccurate data into the device on purpose. So whenever we had the Dobbs decision came out, there were a lot of news articles about men signing up for these femtech apps and just kind of flooding the apps with inaccurate data to try to throw off law enforcement or, make it much more difficult for law enforcement to sift through data. Some female consumers did that as well. That's a huge problem because then your algorithm is being trained on inaccurate data.
Yeah.
The other problem that we have, right, I mentioned that we're trying to build these data sets for women's health. Some femtech companies actually partner with clinicians and with research organizations to look at women's health longer term. And so we potentially have inaccurate data going towards longer term women's health research.
Awesome.
And I believe there was a study in the Wall Street Journal, I want to say, that actually showed that about 49% of consumers do not input accurate data into the devices because they feel like the data they're being asked to input is too sensitive or it's not needed for them to get their algorithmic prediction.
Yeah. And for my days way back when, from programming, garbage in, garbage out.
Yep, exactly. Yeah. And those are so hard to guard against, even if you're a company that does everything right from the diversity standpoint. I mean, it really goes to the fact that these companies need to be only collecting the minimum necessary data and having strong privacy and security protections and policies that will make consumers comfortable with sharing their intimate details.
Well, and I think it comes down to also education, as you were mentioning. You have all different kinds of folks of education levels and whatnot, and understanding. You can't get comfortable if you don't understand. And so I think the education piece is probably huge.
It absolutely is. And what's interesting is, before we had the Dobbs decision, it's not like these apps were doing anything different. They were still collecting these, sensitive types of data. They were still sharing sensitive data. Now women seem to be much more attuned to how that data could be negatively used against them. And so they're starting to pay much more attention. And I think that's going to be beneficial because I think they're going to start demanding from femtech companies that we have heightened privacy and security protection.
Yeah, for sure. So what are 3 to 5 femtech trends? We talked about period tracker and things like that, but I know there's other feminine issues, incontinence and things like that, where they have wearables that are, could you talk a little bit about what maybe 3 to 5 trends might be?
Yeah, you bring up a great point. So a lot of femtech products to date have kind of been focused on the reproductive health aspect of women's health. It's also kind of led to a conflation again, right, that women's health is just limited to reproductive organs. That's something we're really trying to move away from in femtech because we believe women's health is the holistic health of a woman. And so you're absolutely right. I think that the reason we got the period tracking and ovulation apps dominating the market so far is because they were the easy ones to race to market and get through. Right. We are starting to see, though, expansion into other areas. And kind of the top trends that I'm seeing, menopause is a huge one that has boomed since about 2022. We're seeing not only celebrity investment into the menopause industry, but also new and creative telehealth solutions, menopause clothing coming to the market, all of those types of things to really help women deal with the symptoms of menopause. There's actually some new wearables that you can use that kind of can deal with hot flashes. And
I was just going to say a personal fan.
Exactly. They can monitor your temperature, warm you up, cool you down, depending on how your body temperature is being regulated. So that's something, that is coming onto the market and showing that we're expanding past just the reproductive health years. The other trends that I'm starting to see are a focus on chronic care conditions and longevity. And so, where we've historically been just, kind of one-off solutions, we're starting to see more companies come in now and say, how can we tackle things like cancer that women are experiencing? There are some really cool products coming on the market. One of them is by a company called AOA. And they are actually trying to create a blood test for ovarian cancer. There's another company that is coming onto the market. Eventually they'll have one for consumers, but they actually have one for clinicians right now. That is a device that can be used to do a breast exam and use AI to actually detect changes in the tissue and pinpoint any spots that look suspicious during just a routine annual breast exam. Their goal is to eventually get it to the consumer market, right? So you can just use it for your monthly breast exam and get some more credible insights. The smart tampon is actually being invented right now as well, to actually go in and potentially detect changes in the cervix for cervical cancer. Those are products that obviously are going to take much longer to get to market because they have the much more stringent FDA approvals and clinical trial requirements. But they're finally starting to get some traction, some investment. Uterine health is another thing that we're starting to see really blossom lately. We're seeing some companies come on the market with different types of, uterine contraception devices, but also things that are being targeted to help potentially with fibroids, even, which we still don't even know what causes fibroids, and yet it's such a huge problem. So that's where the trend is going. To a lesser extent, we're also starting to see investment in women's health conditions that are they're experienced universally amongst humans, but they may present in women differently. So for example, heart attacks or heart conditions, they present very differently in women. And one company that's starting to come on the market now is using, clothing and bras to have sensors in there to help women track their heart health. So that's also starting to come into the market, though I would say not as much traction there yet.
Yeah. That's one of the reasons why I got the Aura and I have my smartwatch, because I want to know what the heck's going on with my heart.
It's really interesting. So Aura was actually at the conference that I attended, and they've now partnered with Natural Cycles, which is the first FDA approved non-hormonal birth control. And it's interesting, they've partnered together, and since partnering, they've actually seen substantial increase in their user population being female for Aura Ring, being really interested in that partnership and the data sharing and knowing about their health and having that integration. And they're starting to see much more engagement and retention of consumers because they're now focused on incorporating a women's health aspect.
Yeah. When you talk about the heart and whatnot and menopause, sleep is a big problem for menopause. I'm way past that, but I remember, and I know my audience, how they have that. And so how much you sleep, how well you sleep. And so that's another thing that the Aura and your watch can monitor. And it also impacts your weight too. So understanding your sleep patterns and trying to improve them is really helpful.
It's absolutely key. And we're starting to see new products come on the market too that will kind of understand your period cycle and give you recommendations, for instance, on, should you do weight training that day, right? What does your cardiovascular activity look like that day? Oh, you're in this part of your cycle, so we need to be eating more, we need to be sleeping more. So they're actually kind of linking your hormonal health back to your overall health and wellness to give you more optimal performance.
Yeah, I know, when I charted myself, people always concentrate on those 28 days when you're having your period, but when I was ovulating, there was a different things going on. And once I understood that, then my life was a lot better. And I think a lot of women don't really think about that period of actually ovulation.
They don't. And it's hard too, because a lot of women go to their doctors for things like that. And I can tell you, for instance, for menopause, most doctors have less than 4 hours of training on menopause. And so we're not getting the resources that we need from a lot of our, primary care physicians who don't have in-depth training in women's health issues. And so I think that's too a reason why women are starting to turn more to these apps and wearables, because it's where they feel like they can finally get answers and insights about their bodies.
Yeah. And I think that my training in the basal thermometer, understanding my body, actually helped me. My doctor was right away, oh, you should do hormone therapy, to combat it. And I never did. And and my menopause was not terrible. And so, maybe I was just lucky, but I think it's partly because I understood my body a little bit more.
Exactly. And when you have that understanding, you're able to advocate for yourself better too, and know which solutions may or may not work for you. A lot of times doctors are making those recommendations based on just the collective knowledge they have, which we have so few data, as I talked about before, on women's health, that really knowing your body can be a real game changer.
For sure. So is Femtech actually achieving, though, its goals? I mean, is there some something that you would like to see change to make it more beneficial for the audience and for the industry?
It's a great question. So Femtech is still relatively new, and I will say that we are having challenges because women's health is something that's not regularly talked about in society, and so a lot of women's health still suffers from the shame and stigma and taboos that we have in our normal societal discussions about healthcare. And because of that, I think our growth for Femtech has been a lot slower than what we might experience in digital health more broadly. And because of that, we're starting to see Femtech founders have a really tough time getting funding, especially whenever they have to pitch to male VCs.
Mm-hmm.
There's a huge gap in the diversity and inclusivity of venture capital firms. And because of that, women's health products get funded much less frequently than healthcare products for men. So that's been a real challenge that I'd really like to see change at, kind of at a more broad societal level, is really the diversity of VCs, the changing in the way that we can talk about women's healthcare. On a more granular level, what I'd also like to see change are the advertising policies that we have on social media and mainstream websites. Almost every Femtech founder who is dealing with a women's health product has either had their advertisements banned or their accounts blocked or suspended because they're putting accurate medical information on the web, but it might use an anatomically correct term that is associated with, promiscuity, right, or sexuality, and not women's health care as a health and wellness function. So that's something I think as society we have to change. And I think until we do, it's going to be increasingly difficult to get Femtech to its ultimate goal, which is the revolutionizing of women's health care, because it's hard for women to know about these products if we can't advertise. We can't get funding, then these companies go out of business. The other thing I think that's partially contributing to Femtech's slower growth is we need consumer buy-in. And if you've been with a brand, right, for such a long time, it can be difficult to want to change brands, right, and go to something that's female founded, right, or female funded. And until we continue to do that and show that these Femtech products are necessary, we will have slower growth than other areas of digital health.
So are you going out to women's groups and associations and things like that to build that understanding? So, when you get the power of women's voices behind you, then that could help you as well, I think.
Exactly. Yeah. So we are trying to get out to as many organizations as possible, not only to talk about, to older women's groups, right, about, okay, here's how you can be spending your money to support Femtech, right, or here's how you can be using your voice to support Femtech, but also to younger groups, colleges, high schools, et cetera, to try to get women at those younger ages to understand the importance of knowing their body and how data can really help them make transformative and informed decisions. And I think the younger that we can start the educational process, the much more empowered we'll be as a society to demand our changes. I mean, it's so funny, for so long, Femtech was deemed a niche area. We're 50% of the population, 51%. We're the market, right? We're not a niche market. And we have 80+% of the healthcare spending decisions. And so, it's always baffling to me that, as women, we have this power and we're not yet using it to our full potential.
Really, for sure. And have more women be venture capitalists too would help you.
Exactly. Yeah.
So what are some mistakes that they're making? I think we touched on some of them, but what other mistakes are Femtech making? We talked about social media, but in their industry itself, I think manufacturing, as well as where you distribute. I mean, is it to all of the world that you have these opportunities, or are we limited to the wealthy nations, if you will?
Yeah, it's a fantastic question. So right now, over 50% of Femtech investment industry solutions are happening in North America. And of that, right, the majority is in the United States, unsurprisingly. The next areas really that are seeing some Femtech growth are obviously Europe, and then to a much lesser extent, Asia. I think about 14% maybe of the Femtech industry is in Asia. We're starting to see some increased investment and interest in femtech in places like Africa, India, kind of that MENA region, but really it's not started to proliferate there. And that's one of the things too that we try to give voice to is when we talk about women's health, right? It's global women's health. It's not just white women or North American, European women. We need to be looking at global as a holistic issue and a holistic chance to transform women's health. And so there's some great companies out there that are trying to get more clinical studies done in, some of the more impoverished regions of the world to make sure that their data is being incorporated into the algorithms, as we were talking about, and making sure that those solutions can actually be transferable across the globe. Because femtech is so new, I think that we haven't started to see a lot of scaling and growth to other nations yet. We've started to see, places like Israel or Europe, those companies wanting to come into the US market. There hasn't been as much of a trend towards US companies going overseas yet. And so I think the potential is absolutely there for, African and Asian countries to really have a dominant share of the femtech market. It just hasn't been realized yet. I mean, from a population perspective, right? They could be huge.
Yeah.
We just haven't had that realized yet. And we need more investment, more publicity around getting femtech solutions over there.
Two things come to mind. One, the fact that Asia, has always embraced technology so much that it's surprising. But then I think maybe it is partially cultural, where, in countries where women are not equal to men in importance, if you will, if you say it nicely.
Yeah, it's a great point, and I think Asia is starting to embrace the femtech market, but it's much more kind of at the beginning stages of where the US market started. So they're much more into things like reproductive or sexual health and wellness right now, not those, more chronic or longer women's care conditions. So they're kind of, if you look at it on that scale, they're kind of at the beginning of where the US was back in 2016.
So legally, what are the frameworks for telehealth companies? What do they need to understand before they offer things like abortion and things like that?
Yeah, so in addition to the wearables and apps that we're seeing for femtech, we are starting to see some femtech telehealth companies crop up in the United States. There's some, for instance, that focus on menopause, or some that focus on longevity, or just women's health holistically and collectively. It's interesting because, the US has a framework for telehealth that I don't think a lot of people know or understand, especially on the consumer side. And it stems back to the corporate practice of medicine laws that we have in the US. So this is not in every state, but a good number of states have the CPOM. And what the CPOM means, right, is that corporations can't provide medicine. You can't have a corporation that's employing a doctor who's then providing medicine. And there's exceptions, right? But basically, the physicians need to be the owners of the professional corporation, right, or the entity that is providing the medical care in those jurisdictions. And the reason for that is, pretty obvious. You don't want corporations making decisions about patient care based on profit. You want physicians to have the autonomy to make it based on medical necessity and what's best for the patient. So with that framework in mind, how do you make money as a telehealth company? If you're an investor and you're going, well, I want to invest in a telehealth solution or a telehealth company, that's kind of the place to be right now, but I can't own the company. How do I make money? So it's interesting. We have what's known as the MSO friendly PC model in the US. What it basically means is that the, investment vehicle or corporation is going to partner with a quote unquote friendly physician, right? Who's a physician who's aligned with the company's goals, right? And the expansion plan, all of that. And that physician will open up the medical practices, and all of the administrative, technical, non-clinical functions, they then outsource all of that through a contractual arrangement to that management services organization, or that MSO. So that MSO is where, investors can come and invest in. Then, they'll provide all of those services that are non-clinical to the professional entities, and the professional entities are charged solely with providing the medical care to the patients. it's interesting because then, the money flows from the patients up through that professional corporation, and then obviously to the MSO as a fee, an administrative services fee. So most of the money ends up back in that MSO entity. You have, kind of non-investors driving all of the non-medical decisions. And it's a very interesting framework that a lot of people aren't familiar with. And it can, sometimes it's not implemented properly. I can't tell you the number of times I've seen this structure be implemented incorrectly, and you get some, corporate management of clinical functions, which is illegal. So it's one of those things, especially whenever you're looking at telehealth companies as a consumer, making sure that you're finding reputable ones, right, and ones that might be doing it properly. So that's kind of the first thing about structure. The second thing is we're starting to see these telehealth companies really struggling to keep up with the abortion landscape, because if and this is just for telehealth companies that are providing reproductive health care, but the laws are ever changing in the states and the jurisdictions. New laws are popping up and, going through, being introduced and passed almost every day or every week. So that's been challenging to keep up with. And the thing too there is, because we have such a varied state by state legal structure on abortion right now, what do you do if you're a telehealth company that's operating in multiple states? How do you ensure that you're not accidentally providing abortion pills to a patient who's in an abortion restricted state? That's a key challenge right now. We're seeing a lot of companies implement identity and location verification software into their platforms to actually say, okay, are you located right in this jurisdiction where we're providing services? The problem with that is, of course, people can lie. People can claim, right, that they're in California when they're really in Texas. But it at least gives the telehealth companies a little bit of cover that they're actually trying to check the identity. The other things that we've started to see crop up for patients who want access to reproductive healthcare services, but they're in a state that won't allow it, is the use of virtual mailboxes. So a patient, for instance, in Texas might try and see a provider virtually who's in California, and right, maybe they get prescribed abortion medication. They then set up a virtual mailbox in California so that the clinician thinks it's going to a California address, and then it's automatically forwarded over to the patient in Texas. That has a lot of, legal risks with it, and it's interesting, but things like that are being used quite frequently as workarounds, in addition to patients now going to overseas telehealth providers to get abortion medication. It's hard for the US to actually go after companies that might be in Europe, right, who are shipping pills into the US. The problem with that, though, is the pills that you're getting might be sourced somewhere from India, right? And you don't necessarily have the FDA's oversight and approval that this is, a safe medication to be using. So it also adds a little bit of risk to consumers there.
Wow. So it is time for us to just do, I guess, one rapid fire. So how can you change the perception of fear to drive innovation and develop an entrepreneurial mindset?
Yeah, so most people aren't as familiar with my journey, but I actually got into women's health because I had my own women's health condition very unexpectedly. I had a huge uterine fibroid that was so large, it looked like I was 5 to 6 months pregnant, and it was pressing on my organs. And I can tell you that was the most fearful time in my life, having to navigate, advocate for myself, understand my treatment options, and realize that, the only way I could even get a laparoscopic surgery was to go to Mayo Clinic, right? Go hours and hours away to get the best doctor. I had a 7-hour procedure to get rid of the fibroids, and there's always a chance they can come back. And so I've dealt with that kind of fear of, well, what's my body doing to me? Is this going to come back, right? The constant fear of, oh my gosh, is there another one in there now? And that really was very limiting and very inhibiting for a while as you kind of deal with that fear. And it was only after I was able to accept the fear and finally realize, this is something I need to embrace rather than run away from or try to push away and not deal with. When I did that, and I finally said, yeah, I'm afraid, I'm petrified right now. And I tried to work through what it actually was telling me. And it's interesting because I wasn't doing women's health before then. I was doing some healthcare, but I was more interested in financial stability, big, nice, big law corporate job in Washington, D.C. And as a result, I wasn't really pursuing things that were meaningful or that I was passionate about. And as I started to understand more about my health condition, I dove into the research. I learned how many other women would have this. And I thought, I'm a lawyer. I'm not a doctor. So how can I make a difference? And that's when I really started to think, I can help these companies bring their products to life faster. And I can do that because I've really understood my own fear, what that means to me, and how other people may be reacting to it.
Oh, that sounds awesome. Well, if you want to know more about Bethany and be able to connect with her, I'm going to share my screen so you can get a screenshot. And if you're just listening in, I will read the information. As always, the information is on my YouTube channel as well as my website, Find Your Leadership Confidence. And now, for those that are just listening in, if you have a paper or pencil, the website is https://femtechlawyer.com. That's FEMTECHLAWYER.com, femtechlawyer.com. She's on LinkedIn as Bethany Corbin. And she does have another website. I'm going to let her give you that, as well as talk to you about what you can find on those websites and LinkedIn. Bethany?
Thanks. So we have just launched our platform, Fem Innovation. So you can find us at www.feminnovation.com. And there we're really looking to tackle women's health innovation on 4 fronts. We're set up right now to provide the legal and business strategic consulting to early and mid-stage founders. We're also set up to provide educational resources, keynotes, lectures, et cetera, to clinicians to start to bridge that tech founder clinician gap that we've talked about today about product inaccuracy, get more clinicians involved in this field. We're hoping for a 2024 phase 2 launch that's going to provide extensive resources as kind of a one-stop shop platform for founders, clinicians, investors, and anyone interested in women's health innovation. So we're looking for partners, collaboration opportunities, and then our phase 3 launch, as we talked about, is really going to focus on the externally facing communities for women's health and trying to make sure that women have one resource they can go to that's got the medically accurate advice and insights into the different femtech products on the market. So if you're interested in getting involved with us, please reach out. I can be reached by email as well at Bethany, BETHANY, at feminnovation.com.
Awesome. Well, Bethany, you are a delight, and you had so much information, very well presented, and I'm sure brought many questions. So I hope people will go to your websites to be able to connect with you and take advantage of so kindly giving your email address. And I hope that we can have another conversation in 2024 to talk about your new innovations website. Awesome.
Thank you, Vicki. It's been such a pleasure. And looking forward to hopefully having launched our phase 3 in 24 and bringing that back to life for you.
Excellent. Excellent. So as always, I remind everyone that life is a journey and it's up to you to enjoy the ride. This is Vicki Nettling signing off.
Thank you for tuning into the Find Your Leadership Confidence podcast with Vicki Nettling, where we share impactful lessons that help you grow as an individual, grow your confidence, and find the positive and good within you so you powerfully and authentically become the best version of yourself. Remember to visit our website at www.findyourleadershipconfidence.com and enjoy even more great episodes like this one. Again, while you're here, subscribe to us via your favorite network. We look forward to seeing you next time on the Find Your Leadership Confidence podcast.